I think what's crazy here, like I remember like back in the day, right, when we were doing this in like shared service centers, we'd bring on like, some OCR tool that was gonna like solve everything, right? Let's just talk about invoices to start. But what you realized is like the people like in the shared service center, like they were basically like writing like what words could exist, right? So you basically have this like dictionary of like words that may exist on an invoice, right? And that's how like the OCR or like the processing was working, is looking at this huge file of like words that could exist. Here's what to look for. It's basically like this like big like control F, right? That was like happening rather than actually understanding what was on the document, which I think there's like a big difference between those two things.
So many times people improve systems by making them more brittle. And this is another one of those cases where, yeah, in the average case, this is going to improve the quality of your application. But it's also going to mean that when it fails much harder because you're imposing stricter and stricter constraints on what your system can and cannot do. And at a certain point, it ceases to become useful to try and inject all of your preconceived knowledge into the problem. And you should take a step back and let the model handle it for you.
Yeah, I think this is like, well, this goes to what we were talking about earlier. Like, we're like last week, we're at this inflection point too with desktop automation, right? We're like putting all of these rules on desktop automation. And as like organizations are getting deeper in it, you're actually finding less resiliency and more brittleness because like they just keep adding to the rule set, right? And then they're having to make an investment to like basically refactor not just that code, but really like think about the process, which is like it comes back to the same thing, right? Like we're at this inflection point either way.
Well, it's this fundamental paradox, right? It's like the one that we were talking about earlier when you're changing, K from 3 to 4, but with rules, right? And the problem is that literally any problem you can solve. And that's the issue, actually. Because like if there were problems you couldn't solve, this actually wouldn't be a problem. But the thing is, like, literally any problem you see in production, I can write a rule and I can solve that problem, right? However, and this is what people don't understand, it's like once I get to a certain point, fixing that problem causes an error, right? And that's that brittleness, right? And this is why we call it the accuracy treadmill so often, right? Is because when you proceed in that way, the ability to solve every problem is actually the biggest possible danger you could face, because it sucks you into this belief that at some point, your rules will be correct. The problem is you simply haven't written enough rules, or you haven't written the right rules, when in fact, that is not the problem. The problem is that you are writing rules to be